From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Weekend News with Dan Rather and Bob Schieffer in Greenville, South Carolina, Roger Mudd in Jefferson County, Kentucky, Chris Kelly in Boston, Tony Sargent in Atlanta, Richard Threlkeld in Parrots Ferry, California, Sharon Lovejoy in Champaign, Illinois, and a sports report from Haywood Hale Broun in New York. Tonight, interviewing the owner of the baseball champion Oakland Athletics, Charles O. Finley.
Good evening. Republican leaders in the South, as elsewhere, have been telling President Ford that because of inflation, Watergate, and the Nixon pardon, next month's congressional elections may be a disaster for the party. So the president today spent the afternoon going through a Southern political campaign tour. Bob Schieffer was along.
The president will visit 18 states between now and Election Day. His first swing through the South began with this stop in Greenville, South Carolina. Flanked by South Carolina Republican candidates, the president was in good spirits and told the crowd he had come for two reasons: to enlist volunteers in his fight against inflation and to urge the election of more Republicans to Congress. This trip is officially billed as political, and the Republican National Committee is picking up the tab. The gas bill will be sizable. In addition to Air Force One, presidential helicopters and limousines were brought in so the president could squeeze in as many stops as possible. He was well received along the way. He got behind on his schedule several times as he stopped to shake hands and greet well-wishers. He made other stops to stump for local Republicans, and in the town of Anderson, he joined state officials to dedicate a new building that will house the local newspaper. Here, too, the crowds were good. A bit later, they would be somewhat sparse at a Greenville fundraiser, AIDS blamed a Clemson football weekend, but here it was that he used his strongest language to criticize the democratically controlled Congress.
Congress, in my judgment, is stacked against fiscal responsibility. And if they increase their power instead of lose, if they multiply their strength, let me just make one observation. With a veto-proof Congress of the kind of membership they'll get, tighten your seatbelts, folks. They'll spend the dome of the Capitol right off Capitol Hill.
The president will return to Washington early tomorrow. He has two more long political trips scheduled next week. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, Greenville, South Carolina.
In Greensboro, North Carolina, the president said, quote, "I've got a win button. I'm not a loser." He is in Louisville, Kentucky tonight. The Senate race in that state is an example of why Republican leaders around the country are so worried. Roger Mudd reports.
January 1973, glory days for Marlowe Cook, co-chairman of the Nixon inaugural, moving easily with the great and near great on national television after only 4 years in the Senate. But today, all that has changed, and Cook is in serious danger of losing. Cook knows it. After a late start, he is scrambling and stumping through Kentucky's small towns and courthouses.
Good morning. Yes, ma'am. Nice to see you.
We're 100% for you.
There are not many 100% Cook backers in Kentucky. This is not a vintage year for Republican incumbents. Cook's tendency toward what some party officials regard as arrogance has not helped. In addition, his politically adroit opponent, Democratic Governor Wendell Ford, has forced Cook to go on the attack. Cook rarely talks about his own record, almost always about his opponents.
Now, you know, you may say these things are negative. You may say, why don't you talk about things that are positive? I'd like to talk about things that are positive that have occurred in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I've looked around. I declare, they're rather difficult to find.
There's a third candidate in the race, the American Party nominee, William Parker of Louisville, but it is Governor Ford whom Cook is pursuing.
Oh, hey, how are you?
Ford is blessed by what appears to be a united Democratic Party. United mainly because the Lieutenant Governor, Julian Carroll, who heads one wing of the party, will become governor if Wendell Ford, who heads the other, becomes senator. Ford, convinced he will win, refuses to risk a debate with Cook and has become cautious, repetitive, and vague in his limited campaign appearances.
At a time when it seems convenient for some to find fault, to criticize, or to belittle, there are numerous reasons for Kentuckians to express pride. There are numerous reasons for others to say that if Kentucky can do it, America can do it.
Ford makes only veiled references to Cook. illusions to Cook's New York State childhood and to what Ford claims is his detachment from the old Kentucky home.
I don't believe that you can be elected to the United States Senate and go to Washington, close the door, and blow up with Potomac fever and represent the Kentuckians in the United States Senate.
Wendell Ford is supremely confident. He's positive he's going to win big. And if he does, the Republican Party here in Kentucky might almost be wiped out. 6 years ago, when Marlowe Cook took office, the GOP had the governorship, 2 Senate seats, and 3 House seats. Today, it has 1 Senate seat and 2 House seats. Marlowe Cook is behind in Kentucky, and few people here think he can catch up. Roger Mudd, CBS News, Jefferson County, Kentucky.
There's no living with inflation.
There's no living with inflation.
There's no living with inflation.
Inflation. You can't live with it. You can't try to outwit it. Hedges don't always work. You have to stop it cold. Saving, not spending, is one answer. Everyone should try to use restraints and curb spending plans because there's no living with inflation.
I love to call you Rose, dear. I'll still be America's favorite singer 25 years from now. Knock wood.
Miss Americas may come and Miss Americas may go, but I'll go on forever.
Next time you knock on wood, be sure it's Weld wood. Paneling that's as handsome and timeless as fine furniture in a range of prices you can't knock. Weldwood paneling. It's like furniture for your walls.
Vice President-designate Nelson Rockefeller said today that he has given away nearly $25 million since 1957, most of the money going to charity, art museums, schools, and study groups concerned with national and world problems. Rockefeller detailed his contributions in a letter to Chairman Howard Cannon of the Senate Rules Committee. The committee intends to hold further hearings on the Rockefeller nomination to deal with the former New York governor's large cash gifts to government associates and that derogatory book about Arthur Goldberg, his one-time rival for the governorship. Last evening, Rockefeller said he owes nearly $1 million in taxes as part of a settlement with the Internal Revenue Service, a settlement that took several years to reach. The White House said today that President Ford, quote, still has complete faith in his vice presidential choice, and Rockefeller said the tax case reflects no wrongdoing on his part.
There's no disclosure at all. This is an arrangement with the IRS after they finish their audit. This is what's unfair about these stories coming out this way. They had not finished the audit for 5 years. It took them 2 months. They should, it's too bad they didn't do it every year. But what I didn't want to do was to publish my figures before the audit was made. The committee wanted the figures, so I gave them to them unaudited. Now the audit's made, I've agreed to the settlement, and that's that.
You don't think it will have an effect?
Well, of course not. There is nothing wrong. There is nothing illegal. There is nothing immoral, and there's no conflict of interest in anything that I've done or that's come out.
Republican Senator Jacob Javits of New York said the Rockefeller tax case is not a fatal blow to confirmation, but Javits added that this is a cumulative thing and, quote, it might be that the taxes plus other things could sink him, end of quotation. Treasury Secretary William Simon today announced a partial resumption of U.S. grain sales to the Soviet Union. He said the Soviets will be allowed to buy 2.2 million tons of grain and no more until at least next summer. The announcement, which Simon called an agreement between the two countries, follows President Ford's action earlier this month of stopping a planned Soviet purchase of 3.2 million tons. An Agriculture Department spokesman said the new agreement would have only marginal effect on food prices in this country. A House Agriculture Subcommittee report says unless there's a big change in current population growth and food production trends, everyone could be hit with a food crisis much worse than the last energy crisis. The report released today said more than 10 million people, most of them children, will starve to death this year, and that Americans, who make up about 5% of the world's population and consume 40% of its resources, quote, cannot afford to sit idly by, thinking that this problem does not affect us. The chairman of the Fertilizer Institute says there will probably be a tight fertilizer supply next year, and he thinks more of it should be used for food production. Says Joseph Sullivan, if we all have browner lawns and greener gardens, we'll be a lot better off. Supporters of court-ordered busing gathered on Boston Common today, urging an end to violence connected with the busing and an end, too, of the school boycott by some whites. The rally was orderly. So was an anti-busing meeting in another part of Boston. Chris Kelly was there.
They came in motorcades from all sections of the city to Kelly Field, not to watch a football game, but to demonstrate against the forced busing of their children. These 1,500 people gathered in Hyde Park, a white middle-class area where anti-busing resistance has been largely disorganized, where violence between blacks and whites at the high school recently has been the most serious. Today's speakers all deplored the violence that has accompanied school desegregation here, but said they continue fighting for neighborhood schools.
I think that we've got to come to the realization that this law is not going to be changed easily, and we've just got to work within the system and making sure that in future years, maybe a year or 2 years, that we are able to change this law.
Demonstrators from South Boston, East Boston, Dorchester, and Charlestown cheered busing opponents and left no doubt how they felt about two well-known advocates of the court-ordered integration plan.
And may God help us, the names of Kennedy and Brooks never, never, never go in the history books of the United States again.
The afternoon was bright. For many, the mood almost festive. Some children ignored the rhetoric and played on the field while their parents listened intently. Still, the turnout must have been disappointing to the organizers, who said they had expected at least 5,000 here. Chris Kelly, CBS News, Boston.
In Atlanta, residents of a public housing project have been protesting about the living conditions in their neighborhood. So Mayor Maynard Jackson has moved in for a couple of days to experience for himself what life is like there. Tony Sargent reports.
In a chauffeur-driven limousine, Mayor Jackson arrived at the Bankhead Public Housing Project, an all-black community where a week of rock-throwing incidents left several persons injured, one critically. Residents competed with cameramen for a view of their distinguished visitor. Jackson and a bodyguard moved in for the weekend with 38-year-old Mrs. Maggie Thomas and her 7 children. The mayor conducted walking tours through the 500-unit complex. Some units have become uninhabitable in the 5 years since Bankhead was built for over $10 million. A major problem is poor drainage.
Do you have many complaints about apartments being flooded? Or mud going into apartments?
Yes. They had
After touring a community center made unusable by vandalism, Mayor Jackson explained his unusual weekend.
Now, we want to dramatize what are dramatically horrible conditions, so the people will understand when we begin to talk about dramatic changes and dramatic corrective action. So we're not just overreacting. The conditions here defy description.
Even as Mayor Jackson dined in this troubled community, he had plans to spend more than $1 million federal dollars renovating the project, realizing money alone may not bring the dramatic changes he has called for. Tony Sargent, CBS News, Atlanta.
Georgia prison officials said today that last night's fight in the Reedsville prison between black and white inmates was caused primarily by overcrowding, not racial tension. 1 prisoner was killed in the fighting, another 12 were injured.
Who makes a tire that's strong on traction? Atlas. Who makes a tire that's built for action? Atlas. Who makes a tire that grips when wet? Long on mileage. You can bet on Atlas. We've proved the strength of Atlas with tough road testing, like you should never do with your own car. Strong on traction, built for action, grips when wet, long on mileage. You can bet on Atlas. Where can you get tires built with the strength of Atlas? At leading service stations near you.
My opinion, the thicker the steak, the better. The same with the sauce. Thick like Heinz 57. Hi, I'm Chef Mike Roy. Put Heinz 57 next to this other leading steak sauce. See, this sauce is thin, runs, separates. But Heinz stays thick and rich with a spicy flavor you can get your teeth into. Heinz 57. The thicker, the better.
Well, the baseball fans in Oakland get a double dose of suspense every fall. Will the Athletics win the World Series again? And what will Charlie Finley do next? Haywood Hale Brune has more on baseball's most controversial owner.
There are those who call Charles O. Finley, owner of the Oakland Athletics, a fiercely innovative man, good for the state old game of baseball because he shakes it up. There are others who have other words for Charles O. Finley, some not so warm and some not yet really suitable to television. But whatever he is, he's the owner of a 3-time winner of the World Series, and he is right now in the studios of KPIX in San Francisco. You have not apparently always made the players feel wanted and appreciated. Do you think that a kind of scuffly club is an alert, alive club?
Well, we do have a few fights amongst the players on the club. I question them on this frequently, and they come back to me and say that they're just trying to get themselves in shape for tomorrow's game.
What has been your trouble with the press? Why do you think that you don't get on well with them?
Well, I don't know that I get along well or I don't get along well. I think that the press, it's their prerogative to write whatever they wish. As a matter of fact, I could care less what the press writes. I'm not out to win a popularity contest with the press any more than I am out to win a popularity contest with my players.
Are you going to Seattle next year?
I haven't given Seattle a thought since the first time, and that was in 1968.
And at this moment, you plan to keep the club in Oakland? You're certain of that?
Those are my intentions, keeping the club in Oakland.
Well, now, you in this 3rd straight World Series which your team has won have probably had more publicity, personal publicity, as Charlie O. Finley than the whole ball team and the mule thrown in. Was this by your design, or did it just happen that way?
Well, I don't know how much publicity that the mule and myself have received, but whatever publicity we received, I love to be in the World Series.
There's a dictionary definition that says a sportsman is one who abides by the rules of the game and accepts defeat and victory with equal grace. Do you think that's 19th century nonsense?
Well, that has never been my thinking. I'm really a hard loser. It's very easy for me to be a gracious winner, but show me a gracious loser and I'll show you a loser.
This is my wife, and I love her. I love her a lot. And I'll tell you one big reason why. She thinks enough of herself to take really good care of herself.
Well, I just don't think you should let yourself go. So I eat right, exercise, and I take Geritol every day. That way I know I get the iron and vitamins I need.
Geritol, more than twice the iron of any ordinary supplement and some very important vitamins.
My wife, she cares about herself, and I love her for it.
And the band played on.
Do you realize what time it is? Well, even Gloria won't have any trouble falling asleep tonight.
Oh, Uncle Ned remembers I sometimes have trouble falling asleep. He's the one who told me about Sominex.
That's right.
And Uncle Ned,
What?
you know, Sominex really does help make me drowsy so I can get to sleep.
With a lot less trouble. Take Sominex tonight.
Sominex. It helps take the trouble out of falling asleep.
The Army Corps of Engineers has literally changed the face of the country over the decades by building dams on rampaging rivers from Maine to California. The Corps' friends point to the millions of acres of river valley land saved from flooding by those projects. Critics contend that too many wild rivers have been sacrificed in the name of progress. The Stanislaus River in California is a case in point. Richard Threlkeld reports.
Mark Twain went swimming in it. The 49ers panned gold in it, and this year 40,000 weekend river runners splashed their way down its rapids. On some afternoons, California's Stanislaus River looks like a freeway. Because it is so popular and so pretty, a lot of people don't take kindly to the prospect of the Stanislaus being turned off for good. The Army Corps of Engineers is going to build a dam 2/3 of the way up that canyon to tame what's left of the whitewater and put it to work. And then again, maybe the Corps is not. It depends on what the California voters have to say about it come November 5th. The Army's already been working on it for 8 years. If and when it is ever finished, it'll be 62 stories high, the second highest earth-filled dam in the country, and cost around $300 million. Instead of the Whitewater, there'll be a reservoir 24 miles long. Downstream, where the Stanislaus turns into the Big Muddy, local farmers and real estate people figure the dam will be a good thing if it can clean the water up and stop the spring floods.
It'll mean different things to different people. To some, it will mean the end of floods that have disrupted their lives periodically, and this is probably the most significant and dramatic effect for people living adjacent to the river. For others, there will be a benefit of the improved recreational conditions which will be available on the lake itself and in the lower river.
The whole project was sailing along smoothly until this year, when a few university students, the same young people who brought you the Sam Irvin Fan Club, reorganized themselves into something called Friends of the River, got about 500,000 signatures on petitions, and put a proposition on this fall's ballot which would effectively stop the dam right where it is. The river runners who are backing the proposition say they don't see how you can save the river by making a lake out of it. They think the Stanislaus is an endangered species.
Saving this river is kind of like saving the whales. Most people will never see a whale, but it's just kind of nice to know that they're out there, and I think that it's kind of nice for most people to know that there are still a few rivers that just still running free and looking like this river does. And it's the first time in American history that a state has ever had an opportunity to rule on the merits or the demerits of a specific Army Corps project, and we think that it'll be a landmark campaign for a number of reasons.
The campaign has already caused the Corps of Engineers a landmark headache. If the dam's voted down, the Corps says it'll cost the taxpayers $30 million just to stop work and put everything back the way it was. And it's no better for the voters, who will have to decide what to do about this river. Most have never seen it and probably never will. A while back, some pollsters went around asking people what they thought about Proposition 17. 19% said they were in favor, 7% were opposed, and 74% said they couldn't make heads or tails of what it was all about. Richard Threlkeld, CBS News, Parrots Ferry, California.
A new government study on the hearing aid industry recommends that hearing aids be available only by prescription. The study, obtained today by UPI, backs up charges made by Illinois Senator Charles Percy that fast-talking hearing aid dealers often sell bad and overpriced goods. And the study says that some of the hearing aids are unsafe for their intended use, but that people who didn't need them in the first place often buy them, and that the people should have medical treatment instead of just the hearing aid. About 70% of the hearing aids sold annually in this country are sold by dealers. Sir Keith Joseph, mentioned as a possible replacement for Edward Heath as leader of Britain's Conservative Party, said today working-class sexual promiscuity is threatening the English, quote, human stock. And he urged birth control facilities for the working class, even though that would, he said, condone immorality. Joseph said that 1 of 3 births in Britain were to women he called unfit mothers, those who were unmarried, deserted, or had low intelligence or low education. He said that these mothers are producing, quote, problem children, future unmarried mothers, delinquents, denizens of our borschtals, that means reformatories there, and subnormal educational establishments, among other things.
Why do more people buy Timex than any other watch in the world? One reason is the electronic Timex. Put one on your wrist and you'll never have to wind a watch again, because a tiny replaceable energy cell provides power for a full year. And instead of being expensive like many electronic watches, the electronic Timex costs as little as $25. And it's available in a variety of styles. It's even available in a style you can use as a clock. You can use it on the dash of your car, a boat, or in a private plane. Or you can use it as a desk clock. You can even remove it from its case and wear it as a wristwatch. It costs only $25. The electronic Timex is also available with an automatic calendar from only $30, or with a day and date indicator, only $35. The electronic Timex. No wonder more people buy Timex than any other watch in the world. John Cameron Swayze for Timex.
Under the same leaden sky that Grantland Rice wrote about 50 years ago, the 4 Horsemen of Notre Dame went back to South Bend today to watch their alma mater beat Army 48-0 and to be honored by a new generation that knows them, if at all, only by legend. Another legend is back on his college campus this weekend, and for a new generation of fans that best knows the running of O.J. Simpson and Larry Zonka, Sharon Lovejoy tells us what the Galloping Ghost of Illinois could do.
It was 50 years ago at the 1924 Illinois homecoming that Harold E. Grange became a legend. In that game against Michigan, Red Grange scored 5 touchdowns, 4 of them on long runs in the first 12 minutes. It was the start of years of performances that earned him the title of the Galloping Ghost. This weekend, Red Grange came back to Illinois.
I was very happy and proud that I had the opportunity to play here at the university.
It was part of this year's Illinois homecoming honoring Grange's performance, with, of course, Grange as the main attraction, and obviously a big booster of football.
I think playing out here in competition, it kind of sets you up to compete when you get out of it, Sharon. I think it's a great background, and I don't think I've ever met an athlete or a college football player that I didn't like.
Last night, Red Grange was rejoined by his surviving teammates at dinner, and among those present was his first professional coach, George Hallis. He made Grange the first $100,000 pro athlete.
Red Grange had more impact on the game of football, college and professional, more than any other single man in this century.
Red Grange helped dedicate this same Memorial Stadium at Champaign 50 years ago. This weekend, he reminisced about his college career.
I don't take any credit for anything except when you have the football, you know, if you don't run, you've got 11 big guys looking for you. So if you're smart, you'll run, Sharon, believe me.
This afternoon, over 55,000 fans roared as Grange was introduced at halftime.
I once talked to Coach Supke here, and he said if I was in a war and I needed 2 or 3 fellas to help me, say take a machine gun nest or something, he said I'd pick 3 or 4 guys out that played football. Well, you can call it guts or courage or whatever you want. And you don't play football out on a football field if you don't have that. You don't last very long.
In today's game, Illinois played Michigan State, and the only sour note of the weekend, a tie ball game, 21-21. Sharon Lovejoy, CBS News, Champaign, Illinois.
For CBS News, Dan Rather in New York. Thank you for joining us.
Mary, how much that was, Mary? Where's our Rolaids?
Acid indigestion.
And how? Try these, they're good. Good, maybe, but they're not Rolaids.
In this medical report, Rolaids active ingredient was medically recognized safe and effective, taken as directed. Rolaids, with no extra ingredients not intended for your stomach, consumes 47 times its weight in excess stomach acid. Rolaids ingredient, medically recognized, safe and effective.
We steeped a string of pearls in a pot of tea, pearls made of denture material to prove extra strength Effordent removes even stubborn stains between teeth in minutes. Watch as extra strength Effordent's powerful stain removers burst into action. In minutes, even the stubborn tea stains in between are cleaned. Get Effordent, and for extra strength in your denture adhesive, get Effer-Grip, stronger holding power from the makers of Effordent.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this has been the CBS Weekend News with Dan Rather. Senate Majority Whip Robert Byrd from West Virginia will be the guest tomorrow on Face the Nation. What is the link between vinyl chloride and liver cancer? CBS News examines the health hazards of vinyl chloride in the case of the plastic peril. Tonight at 10, 9 Central on CBS.